HanselMinutes.com. It's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman, hosted by Carl Franklin. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 118, recorded live Wednesday, June 18th, 2008. Support for Hansel Minutes is provided by Telerik RAD Controls, the most comprehensive suite of components for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.telerik.com. And by the Code Better blog network, delivering tried and true solutions to real-world problems for building better software. Online at codebetter.com. Support is also provided by .NET Developers Journal, the world's leading .NET developer magazine. Online at www.sys-con.com. In this episode, Scott talks with authors Mary and Tom Poppendieck about lean software development.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. I'm sitting here in Oslo, Norway, with Mary and Tom Poppendieck, author of a couple of books that continue to sell well about lean thinking in software development. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I know you have a lot of thoughts about this, and we've had some pretty spirited discussions in the hallways and on a couple of Agile panels. During the Agile panel this morning, I made the comment about using success as a metric, and Mary, you jumped all over me about the definition of success, and I thought that was really interesting. Can you say a little something about that?
Sure. There's this report called the Chaos Report. It's put out by the Standish Group. It's been put out since maybe early 90s. Every year, it tells those of us in software development how terrible we are. And it says that if you look at projects, a huge percentage of projects are either not on time or not in scope or not in budget, and therefore they are failures. So therefore we in software development are failures. So that report defines success as on time, on budget, and in scope. And I think that's the wrong definition of success. And as I heard a few hints of on time, on budget, as success from you, I challenge the concept. I think success has to do with making sure that you have a business success. For example, if it's a commercial project, that you develop something that does what it is that the business needs, that creates, for example, a product that has good market share, has good profitability. If it's in the private sector, at minimum, there was a reason for which this project was funded. Is that reason accomplished? And I don't think there's necessarily a correlation between cost, schedule, and scope and true success of a project.
It seems that all the developers are told is their goal is to be done by a certain date. It seems like that should the developers be worried about the business like that?
They certainly should. I developed products for 3M, and we had product teams. They were somewhere between half a dozen and 30 people. And the charter was to develop new products and put them on the market. The team was expected as a team to figure out what the market really needed, to create a profit and loss statement which showed whether or not it would be profitable, to then decide what kind of features should be in it, when was the right time to introduce it to the market. And the team was judged based on whether or not a year later they had a profitable P&L for the actual product in the market. That means that everybody on the team is involved in figuring out what's really important, what isn't important, whether it happens to be schedule or whether it happens to be meeting a show date or whatever. But the team as a group decides, what are we really trying to do? Because success is defined at a higher level than the derivatives of cost, schedule, scope.
Very few organizations really want software. They have a problem that they want solved. They have a opportunity they want to take advantage of. If they could solve that problem without software, so much the better. If they could take advantage of that opportunity without software, so much the better. It is the problem solution that has value. It is exploiting the opportunity that has value. And if the software is not developed with regard to effectively and efficiently and profitably addressing the opportunity, addressing the problem, we're looking at totally wrong criteria for success.
Okay, that's interesting. I've always had this phrase that I've thrown out when arguing with people, my contemporaries, about this idea of, well, success is my metric. But now you've kind of thrown my whole concept of what I thought success was on its ear. So now I'm wondering, what are my metrics? What am I able to measure and then point at and say, we did good or we did not do well?
So I have this theory. It's called measure up. When you have a bunch of measurements, let's just take cost, schedule, scope. Those are interesting measurements. And you accomplish them all, and yet stuff falls between the cracks. Say quality, say customer satisfaction. And you think, wow, maybe cost, schedule, and scope weren't the right things, because guess what? Quality wasn't there. Customer satisfaction isn't there. So now what do? Do you measure 5 things instead of 3 things? Then how do you figure out which one's more important? So when you start going from 3 measurements to 5 measurements, the theory with measure up is you have too many measurements. And you don't know which one's important, and given a team, anybody can take their pick. So your measurements are at too low a level. So you need to go up 1 layer and say, what single system level measurement will measure all these things? Cost, schedule, scope, quality, customer satisfaction in a single measurement. Instead of a whole bunch of, instead of going from an iron triangle to an iron pentagon, you want a single higher level measurement. So the higher level measurement in software development would be whether or not there is a business success, whether or not, for example, in our company, you had a profitable P&L after a year. That's a higher level measurement. You have to have the right goals for cost and schedule and scope and quality and customer satisfaction. But how you trade those off against each other is determined by whether or not the higher level measurement is achieved. And I think people who develop software are smart enough when they're sitting in their team to be challenged with a higher level goal and figure out what are the trade-offs we need to make in order to reach the higher level goal. They don't need that interpreted for them through lower level measurements. They can, in fact, be challenged to meet the higher level measurement. And in fact, a company's more likely to get what they really want when they ask for what they really want, not proxy measurements.
Should we be ignoring certain measurements? Are you saying, I'm trying to understand if you're saying we should roll measurements up, or we should be simply just not measuring some things and thinking about the big picture? I'm
on a product development team because I did a lot of product development at 3M. Some involved software, some did not. And let's say that the marketing guy says there's a show and it's June 15th. And this is an annual show. And if we don't show this in our annual show, it's going to be a year before we can really put it on the market. And he makes that plea to the team. Now, this team wants a successful product that starts selling soon, and they get the fact that this is not an artificial deadline. This has to happen. And then the quality person says, you can't be showing something at a show that's junk. That's worse than showing it at all. And then the people get the fact that, yes, this is also true. Now, how do you take these tensions? We don't have a quality product. We have a deadline. And how do you come to some sort of balance between those that works? So then maybe you say amongst the team members, what can we do at high quality that will give the right impression to those in the market, but maybe not be a complete product? What can we do at the demo? Suddenly people are engaged in saying, how do we make sure that we have something in the show and make sure that what we show is high quality and not mislead the customers that something is available that isn't available? What can we do? And if you get a group of, 10 smart people that care deeply about that product being successful, sorting those tensions out, you're going to get the best resolution. If you have somebody that isn't deeply engaged and doesn't know the details of the trade-offs trying to figure it out, you actually are unlikely to reach the best solution.
So it's identifying the tensions and trying to find the balance that in that kind of spider graph of these different tensions, rather than looking at metrics like tests passed and number of successful builds and these kinds of things that we spend so much time focusing on.
Well, you want tests to pass, but which tests? Maybe only this set of tests are the ones that need to pass for the show. Maybe that set of tests can pass after the show.
Because the tensions are going to change on June 16th.
Right. A smart team of a dozen people that are putting a product on the market at least this is my experience, having led some of these teams, can make good decisions about how to solve these inherent, conflicts between different areas of the company. The quality people, would probably never want to have product on the market, and the marketing people would never want anything having to be developed. And there has to be some balance between all of the different competing forces and trade-offs. And a team is the best group of people to balance those trade-offs and make the best possible shot that as a group they can figure out to hit the market with a profitable product.
It seems like there's these parallel, I'm trying to visualize this, but it seems like there's these parallel worlds where there's what the developer's perception of things and how the developer's providing value and what they think the life cycle of the software is. And then there's this larger overarching, value proposition where what the business is providing, of which the software is a small bit. Are those competing? Are they parallel?
They should be the same. The developers should be well aware of the overall life cycle. The language that we use in talking about software often uses the phrase, the business. Now, the implication of saying, well, we have the team and we need cooperation from the business implies that the team is not part of the business. The team should be thinking our business, not the business. The very concept of requirements, for example, implies a handover from someone in the business telling us what to do, and our only responsibility is to do it. If it is our business, then we collaborate with others in our business to solve problems, to come up with solutions, to identify the right functions, the right capabilities that will profitably produce a valuable solution for the market, for the business process we're supporting, or whatever.
It seems that in the projects and the companies that I've worked on, we have had this sense of disconnectedness where there's the techies that are in the back room somewhere, or they're kept in the basement and brought out occasionally. They really are separate from the business. Is that part of just software culture? Why have we been so disconnected?
How has it worked for you?
It's worked rather poorly, I would say. And interestingly, when we started getting into agile methodologies and people started using this concept of collective ownership, it started to get people a little more excited, but then they started saying collective code ownership rather than ownership in the larger sense, and we were still disconnected from the business.
There is this group of people in a department in many companies called IT, okay? And very often it's a separate organization from the business. Mm-hmm. In the same businesses, there will be marketing and there will be finance and there will be, development and stuff. And for some reason or other, IT seems to be off in some other world. Mm-hmm. I think it's due to the fact that this was a new technology and people in businesses didn't know how to deal with it. But heavens, we're long past that anymore. And it isn't necessary for IT to be separate from the business. And, in a product company where product either contains software or is a software, either retail package or commercial software, there's no excuse for the software development folks to be separate from the business. They make the product. In a bigger company, you want to look very closely as to why you take IT people and think of them as separate from the business. So I think it has history in IT organizations being sort of a new techie area.
But they were a fad, right? Everyone's getting their IT, they're getting email, and now people are talking about removing IT altogether, outsourcing it into the cloud.
When IT is routine, how many ways are there to do email? How innovative can your email system be versus others?
Yeah.
There's a real good reason for that. When some types of automation and software are core competitive advantages of the company, then that's not such a good idea, because if you sell off your development capability for core competencies, then anybody can copy it. Mm-hmm. So there's a very big distinction between what I'll call core competencies of a company, and they will often be software-based or technical-based, and when it is something totally routine, which is, as what did as I've heard, is that sort of like lights on stuff.
Yeah. A lights on moment that we had at a large banking company that I worked on was what someone had made the comment, we're trying to put some accounts in a grid in a web browser.
Okay.
And that was the requirement. Put the accounts in the grid. And one of the young men wanted to make the world's greatest grid control. and the reminder by our very wise CTO at the time was that, are we in the business of doing banking software or making grid controls? And he said, well, I can buy one for $500. And let's say you're a $100 an hour worker. You have 5 hours to make the world's greatest grid control, or I will buy one. And then that was the end of that discussion.
Yes.
But that reminder of the core competency is that that maybe we have a bunch of software engineers who are thinking about software, and then they are suddenly reminded that software is not what we're trying to accomplish here today. Is such a lights on moment.
And so the software group that remains in the business is there because they are developing a core competency that's very fundamental to that business success. And it's very important to have them deeply engaged in that. Otherwise, why not have somebody else in some other company do the work?
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman with a word from our sponsor. Do you know how to build Web 2.0 Ajax applications with Web 1.0 components? You really can't. If you want to do the next generation web applications, you'll need next generation components, just like the ones that our friends at Telerik have got. They're RAD controls for ASP.NET Ajax. It's a huge pack of web controls built on top of ASP.NET Ajax that'll add previously impossible performance and interactivity to your next project. The new controls mirror the Ajax API from ASP.NET, so development is really straightforward. The client scripts are shared, so loading time is not a problem. You just set a couple of properties, and you'll be able to automatically bind to web services for a really efficient operation. The new RAD editor from ASP.NET Ajax Telerik loads up to 4 times faster than before, and the new RAD grid handles thousands of records in just milliseconds. But, as always, it's best to try for yourself. So you can visit telerik.com/ASP.NET Ajax and download a trial. Thanks a lot. This week's Hansel Minutes is brought to you by CodeBetter.com. The CodeBetter.com blog network. It's made up of over 20 industry leaders and speakers who are passionate about delivering tried-and-true solutions to real-world problems for building better software. These guys are not only our sponsor this week, but they're also my friends. The CodeBetter blog network, it's where industry leaders blog. You can find them at CodeBetter.com, as well as Devlicious, DEVLICIO.us. So, are agile methodologies a way to is that a gateway that we can get people more engaged? Is there some aspect about agile that's going to allow people to get more engaged, or is this just a passing phase?
Okay, I'm not sure how to answer that because even agile methods have oftentimes been named only at the development organization. Go ahead, Tom.
All the agile methods do insist on frequent, continuing contact between the customer and the builders, between people who have the problem or responsible for addressing the problem and those who are going to build software to address the problem. But I don't think it goes nearly far enough. Because it's still, all the agile approaches still build in a handoff from one or more people who are solely accountable for the business side, the product design side. We still call those requirements, which is very curious because they are not requirements. They are simply design decisions, problem solution design decisions made by somebody else. They get handed off, and the developers don't get to question them. That's not healthy.
Is this a problem about this different kinds of knowledge? I mean, the idea that there's the C-level executive that has some knowledge, some understanding of the business, or some skill that I don't have as a developer, while he can't program. There's this idea, it's almost like there's the monks on high that have the technology to create books and the printing press, and then there are the plebs who don't have any ability to read. We keep the computers out of their hands because they'll just hurt themselves with that knowledge, and they keep us under their iron thumbs.
So let me give a different picture of a corporate structure, okay? The fact is that the folks on high don't have either the knowledge or the capability to figure out in detail what needs to happen in order to make the business successful. And good people on high that are trying to lead a company understand that. And they understand that the way to have the company successful over the long term is to take all those intelligent, what did you call them, plebs, and make sure that they leverage their intelligence to do new creative stuff and to think through problems and stuff like that. So what I'm looking for in a company is a structure which, in which the management team understands that what they really need to do is provide the leadership so that all those smart people can be properly organized and properly headed in the right direction to create all kinds of new ideas and new benefit for the company. Now, I've seen companies work very well like that. Not all companies work like that. But when companies have good management that knows how to be leaders and enable the people doing the work to be smart about what they're doing and to further the interests of the company, and everybody's engaged in that, then you can have quite an interesting company. If you have people who are buying labor for money, okay, and paying you to do what they say, well, that's interesting, but that's not going to give them anywhere near as good a company.
I've done engagements with, let's just say, large consulting companies that might come in, and we might pay them to. I like to say we pay them to whiteboard. And what problem are we trying to solve by bringing these large consulting companies in? I mean, there's the kinds that come and whiteboard for money and then they leave. There's the kinds where like you said, we're renting them for a while. Using we need more bodies. We need, someone with a pulse needs to come in.
So at our company, the people who were expected to know the most about their business were the people in the business. And there was always the thought that outsiders couldn't conceivably know as much or do as much. When we implemented just in time in our factory in early 1980s at 3M, there was a management team. I was on it. There were about 8 of us. And we needed to have a whole different concept of manufacturing because our competitors were making stuff much cheaper than we could make it for. Mm-hmm. And we had to do something very different. Fortunately for us, there weren't consulting firms that could tell us what to do. We could read a book, we could get a consultant in for the day to give us some new ideas, and that was about it. And as a group, we read some available stuff, we thought through, and we figured out what is this stuff that we're learning? How does it work in our world? And we changed the whole concept of how we did manufacturing. And we did it as a small management team. We were maybe young enough and brash enough to think that we were smart enough to do it. And we were successful. And what I think is that what you should be looking for is ideas, ways to think inside of a company. But in the end, a company and its management team has to change themselves. If they think they can hire some, people to come in and solve all of their problems, well, I'm not so sure it's going to work.
When we brought, I went from a company that was a standard waterfall, and we brought in Scrum, and we had a sense that something was happening. There was this. We didn't want to get too wrapped up in the name Agile and the idea that we're going to be successful just by virtue of the fact that we're doing this, but at least we were doing something.
Yes.
Was this?
How did it work for you?
The first few iterations went poorly, but it took about 5 years.
And
they've got it down to a meter.
Okay.
It seems to be working well for the purposes of delivering the kinds of software that they want to deliver. But after the consultants left, and after the software packages that promised to do everything correctly, didn't work, it really came down to people and experience and getting a couple of years of failure under our belts.
Call it learning.
Unlearning. Is that just, I'm hearing that that's just how things work. You just have, there's no book, there's no process, there's no consultant that's going to make this happen.
There are ideas that help steer people in the right direction. And, but if you can pay somebody to come in and sort out your business problems, so can your competitor. If you really want to be good and be ahead of the other folks in the world, then you have to have some underlying competencies that only you in your company can figure out. And if you want to do something that's new and unique, then you have to figure out how does this company that we in this company know better than anybody else how do these ideas work in our environment and in our world. Now, that's not a one-day thing. It's a journey. So you start out with an idea, and you get that idea working, and you're somewhat better. And then you say, okay, now what's our biggest problem? And then you head down that path and say, now what's our biggest problem? And it's a never-ending, constant improvement journey. So there should never be an end, but it would help if there was a direction set. So I think ideas, books, that sort of thing, help give people underlying theories of what to do, which way to head. But for having somebody come in and do it for you, well, they'll probably do it to you instead.
There are maybe 4 things that a consultant can be valuable for. At the lowest level, it's simply capacity, labor. You need more work done for a while, so you hire some extra hands. At a second level, a outsider can bring in ideas, a fresh perspective. Somebody who has been to many organizations will see your problems, your situation, with a different light than people that have been in it forever. Now, whether what they'll see is right or not is something that only the people inside the organization can assess. And a third thing is accelerate acquisition of new skills that you can get from a book, you can get from the manual, but if you can benefit from other people's mistakes rather than being forced to repeat them all yourself, you can get better faster. But it isn't going to solve your business problems. You have to decide which skills, which perspectives, and what capacity you need.
And the fourth?
I lumped 2 together.
I think that idea of understanding what is this company good at, what is our core competency. It's such a core competency has become a buzzword in itself, but it really is true that a nice company-wide reset to remind ourselves what we're trying to accomplish is really important, and the idea that no consultant is going to come in and be able to tell us what our core competency is.
That really leads to a second measure of success. We talked earlier about success in terms of achieving the business objective of the product or the business process that you're developing software for. The second metric is how rapidly and reliably can you do this? How effective are you at development? Your capacity and capability needs to continually improve.
You had made a comment to me, Mary, about how you thought, and I'm putting words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, that it may be the case that this agile buzzword is a fad.
Okay, so if you go back through the history of software, and I've been around in it for a lot of time, so it's not so hard for me to do. Back when I was developing software, we didn't have this. In fact, I didn't even hear of this word called waterfall till the late 90s. So when I was developing software in the late 70s, early 80s sort of thing, and I did process control software, we did talk with our customers. We built stuff in our offices that was going to be hooked to hardware. We created simulators to test it because we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on site shaking it down. We were told that if the people in the plant didn't like or use our software, it wasn't their fault, it was ours. So we really needed to understand what their problems were. We were told, once you deliver software, the best indicator of success is if the plant asks for changes. Because now they suddenly have some idea of what the software might be able to do for them, and they're asking for more. If they don't ask for any changes, they're probably not even using it. So this is a good deal. And what you're trying to do is deliver a starting point where they will constantly ask for more of this good technology to help them do their job better. And you were always intimately involved in the software and its use and the people who were going to use it. And that's my vision of software. Then there were various types of fads. There was structured programming, and there was user programming, and there was fourth generation languages that were going to save the world. And then there was, let's see. objects and patterns and
But as you're describing your relationship with the plant,
yeah,
myself as someone who hasn't been in the business that long,
Mm-hmm.
I started in '92. I'm hearing you describe what I think of as being agile.
Yeah,
an
right.
on-site customer
And
an
just
iterative
not
development. Does that mean that certainly we'll all eventually be programming Lisp again? So it'll just be agile methodology in Lisp. And
No, I don't think so. It was Fortran that I did, and I really hope that people don't go back to that or assembly language.
I was just going to say that have we simply come back to exactly where we were before? What's a post-agile world look like?
Well, if you take a look at, I don't care what it is, whether it's objects or agile or waterfall or anything, I see these things, or CMM or CMMI or you name it. These are what I call fads that last for like 7 years. Guess what? 7 years is a management generation. And they become the great thing that's going to save the world. And then after they turn out not to save the world, then the next thing comes along, and it's going to be the great thing that saves the world.
Isn't that a process of continuous improvement, though? Or is that
well, one hopes. But, in software, we seem to have gone from one extreme to another extreme and back over to the other extreme. So we don't ever seem to land in the middle.
Well, thus is the nature of sine waves.
Yeah, exactly. So, when I talk about fads, I mean swinging this pendulum all the way from one side to the other without ever seeing the middle. And I've come up with some reasons why this happens in software. Okay. So my first reason is, it's silver bullet mentality, especially from a management group that doesn't get technology and they're looking for some silver bullet answer to whatever their problem is. And whatever the latest and greatest thing out there that's supposed to solve your problem is, they're on it. Okay. And if it happens to be agile, they're going to be on agile. And if whatever the next thing is, they're going to go for that. And, yes, if that's mentality's there, this is a fad. And then there's the somewhat better reason, and this is what I'm going to call the crisis mentality. I went through a time in our plant where if we didn't change the way we did things, we were going to just have to fold up and stop making stuff because we had to drop our prices. Crisis is good because it gets people to say, how do I do something differently than what I'm doing today and actually get better results? So crisis mentality is also a good thing to trigger people to do something new. And generally, it's more likely to lead to success. Then the third one is, and this is why I think we always end up with a pendulum swing. In our world in software development, there are natural tensions that belong there. There's nothing wrong with them. We need to get work done, but we need to have a structure and architecture to do it in. We need to start putting stuff out, but on the other hand, we need to learn before we start diving in or we're going to have a mess later on. We live in a complex world and people keep wanting stuff, so we need to be simple. But then again, if we're too simple, we don't give people what they want. So there's a very strong tension between different extremes. And instead of trying to figure out how to take that tension to the middle, we swing from one end to the other. So it used to be that we were doing all of the stuff which got the bad name analysis paralysis. So now we're into, well, let's not do any analysis at all. Well,
right, which is agile as an excuse to be sloppy.
Yes. So the point is that there's a natural tension between making stuff happen and having the knowledge to know which is the right way to go that's going to last in the long run. The thing you need to do is to figure out how to not compromise on the tension, but honor it and come to some middle ground that works and plays the two tension areas off against the other and comes to a good center where both things are taken care of the best that they can. Now, there's no magic recipe for doing that because the tensions in any given business are going to be different. I mean, the tensions when you're developing software for a medical device are very different than when you're putting a website up. And so there's going to be different like middle grounds or resolutions. And so I think what we need to do is to figure out how to use all of our brain power to come to to recognize that there are conflicting things, that you don't always do things the same way. It's going to depend upon the world, the environment, and stuff like that. There's no hard and fast rule, but there are extremes that we have been, we're tending to go to. And what we want to do is end up balancing the really important tensions in any given environment so that we come to the best resolution of those. And the companies that can do that better than others in their environment are going to be the ones that are going to win.
To come back to the idea of crisis, there are two aspects to crisis. One is the crisis that's forced upon you by your competitors, and the other is the crisis that you force on your competitors. The second is the one that you really should be chasing. Become so good that your competitors face a crisis. Now, there are two ways of doing that. One way is with a really innovative, radical product that will really grab the market. Apple's very good at this. The other way is by getting very, very good at the kind of product development that you do and that is what Agile offers you, is a much faster way of creating software products.
Well, I hope that gives our listeners a lot to think about. I know it's given me a lot to think about, and I think I'm going to go out and read a couple of books on lean software development. So thank you so much, Tom and Mary Poppendieck, for sitting down and talking to me today.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much.
And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. I will see you again next week.